he had 5 deaths. There's another guy, one author named, I think it's R. Michael Gordon, who wrote a book about this called The Thames Torso Murders of Victorian London. He also thought that it was possible that a murder in London in 1902 was related. I'm a little skeptical about that one.
That's a pretty long
That's a long
spell.
That's a long spell, and so I kind of doubt that one. The Montrose one in Paris, though, that maybe, because, I mean, Paris and London really aren't that far apart. It fits the timeline nicely, about, maybe 6 months or so before the first London murder.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind that might have been a motivator for whoever committed this torso murder in France to maybe want to leave France is there was I know I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, this Sino-French Wars, which were in Asia, but of course the French are shuttling soldiers, which means the number of men in the area are going to be dropping, which means that it's more obvious when you're the lurker left behind, which could motivate somebody to either A, not want to go to war, or B, realize that they're going to start standing out like a sore thumb and motivate them to leave. Now, I'm not sure that these two were linked, but I could see a line between those.
I can too. I mean, I definitely. It makes you wonder. I mean, again, Paris and London not far apart. But it's entirely possible, and there could be other murders out there somewhere else in France or over the continent. We'll talk about that later on when we start our period where that part of the podcast where we talk about irresponsible speculation and things like that.
Theories.
So, yeah. But it does appear that the same murder may have struck before in London in 1873. And maybe 1874 also. So it's possible maybe our perp started his career in London, maybe headed off for the continent or somewhere, and continued to murder people, and then eventually came back to London, years later in the late 1880s. Is that possible? Maybe. So let's go back to let's talk about the 1873 murders, which were also grisly and disgusting. So September 5th, 1873, Thames policemen found part of the left side of a woman's torso in the mud in the Battersea area, which is, I'm not sure, that's around the Tower kind of area, isn't it?
Oh, I suddenly cannot think of where it is. It's in London. I don't remember exactly where.
London's a big town, close enough, right? And also, maybe I won't talk that much about the actual location, since they don't really mean anything to anybody aside from people who live in London. So maybe I won't do that.
No one that listens to us lives there, so.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a good point. Same day, another policeman found the right half of a woman's torso floating in the Thames. Others found some human lungs in a couple of different places. Next day, a woman's face and scalp were found. I know. No skull, just the face and the scalp. They'd been peeled off. And then 2 days later, a right thigh showed up, and a right shoulder and part of an arm.
So this is very similar to what we've just been talking about in terms of showing up in parts. And there was no pun intended in that, but in parts in different areas.
Yeah. Except what's different about it is the face and scalp, showing up too.
No skull, though.
No skull, though. No, the skull was never found. Police searched. The body parts, first of all, were all brought together somewhere at a police lab or something, and they put together like some sort of metal framework and reassembled the body on it. Ugh. Yeah, and apparently pictures were taken, but I've never seen any. I don't really want to. Sounds hideous. The police surgeon determined the victim was a woman about 40 years old, short dark hair, burn scar on her left breast. Cause of death, he determined, was most likely a blow to the head in this case. So I'm presuming that there was maybe some sort of contusion mark on the scalp, because they still had that.
Yeah.
So maybe
it's that, or like we've been talking about before, the only part they really didn't get that didn't appear to have any wound on it other than hacking it up was the skull.
I mean, somehow he said blow to the head versus he could have said some sort of brain injury, whether it's a bullet or a baseball bat or
unknown.
But again, that's not totally proven, but that's the closest they ever came with most of these. Now the face and the scalp, that was stretched over a butcher's block. I know. Apparently to make it a little more identifiable, I'm not sure. And the word got out that if you were missing a loved one, you should come on down to the police station.
Well, there was no Netflix at the time.
I know. So what's that? There's your entertainment, I guess. But apparently a lot of people did. You could go down there if you wanted to and have a look at this hideous face stretched over the butcher block. If you're squirming a little bit right now out there, listeners, I'd like to remind you this is Halloween month, and we did promise you Tales of the Macabre. And it doesn't get much more macabre than this one, right?
Really?
It really doesn't. There was one guy who showed up and looked at the face and thought it might be his daughter who was missing, although he said that she didn't have a scar on her left breast, so maybe not. And I really don't know how recognizable your face would be without a skull underneath it to give it its normal shape.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I don't think very recognizable.
Yeah. And
it would be just like those movies you see where the bad guy peels off the mask to reveal who he is, and he throws the mask on the table, and it's all wrinkly and
blobby.
It's got no tension left to it. I mean, that's exactly what it would probably be.
Yeah.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, but I imagine how weird, how awful it would be, though, to go down there and see your daughter's face, Ooh.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So
we can move on.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, okay, meantime, some other body parts were showing up in the area of London Bridge. They found 2 lower legs, part of the right arm, and a left foot, which, of course, were added to the reassembled body on the metal framework. And eventually the police had everything except the hands and the skull. Yeah. And, of course, the victim was never identified. Cause of death, never definitively found, but probably a blow to the head. And, again, it was determined that the killer had some surgical skill. Sounds a lot like our guy, doesn't it? And then in June 1874, another torso was found in the Thames near Putney, wherever that is. Where's Putney?
In London.
Okay. Oh, that's close enough. The body in this case was a woman, once again, missing the head, arms, and feet. The other body parts never showed up, and the victim was never identified, as usual. The head never showed up. It's a little different from the 1873 murder in that the parts didn't show up, but other than that, I don't know, it was pretty similar, surgical skill, dismemberment, all that stuff. And again, just like in some of the other cases, maybe they were put out there at a certain time, high tide, and the tide flushed them out to sea. Who knows? There's a lot of similarity between these killings and the ones that happened in 1887 and 89, I think, anyway. Not to mention the Paris one. I think maybe our killer took a break, but that's hard to imagine. I mean, it could be that maybe he was in prison. Maybe perhaps he got married and just tried to reform himself, and then along came the divorce or something, and he decided, screw it.
Or a big fight.
Could it be he just went off to the continent and went on a killing spree, like I kind of mentioned before?
Yeah, it's always possible. I mean, it would be impossible to search all of the records.
Oh, yeah, across Europe and find out.
I mean, especially like if you went someplace like Russia or China or one of those giant countries, especially
colony, and then like a British colony, and then left, and
it'd be impossible.
It would be. Well, it's possible, but the records
not
are
by us.
Not by us. Oh, hell no. But maybe somebody could do it. I've also wondered if maybe the killer was in the Army or the Foreign Service. Maybe he got shipped out to some British colonial possession, like in Africa or, India, somewhere like that. And while he was there,
right, like we were just talking about,
yeah, like I said, kept on plying his trade. And there's some parts of the world where stuff like that probably would attract less notice than it would in downtown London.
Yeah.
Well, there's parts of the world where when you throw those bits and pieces of a corpse around, the local animal population takes them.
Yeah,
they snarf them right up.
Happily.
Oh yeah. It might be the earlier 1873 4 killings were carried out by somebody different than our London torso killer. I don't know. I think the similarities are just too much to ignore between those 1873 killings and the late 80s ones, myself. But again, on the other hand, maybe the 1888 killer was inspired by the 1873 killer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's always possible.
It is possible. I mean, it's not like there's only a handful of people out there with surgical skill. There's probably plenty of people that had the skill to do this kind of thing.
Or butchers, yeah.
Yeah. Sheer speculation. I don't know. I think it was probably the same guy.
I don't know. It's quite the break, but like we said, I mean, they could have gone somewhere.
Could have been off having fun somewhere else, So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately for this particular one, it's unlike Jack the Ripper, no suspects were ever identified at all. They never even had a clue as to who could possibly have done this. And so that makes for kind of a thin theories section because we don't have any actual human beings that we could talk about the likelihood of them being the killer. But nonetheless, there are some interesting theories out there about this. But before we get into the theories, let's take a break.
Watching kitten videos, competing in a solitaire tournament, working on your coloring book, writing your true romance novel, twiddling one thumb at a time. These are all options for filling your time over the next week until our next episode comes out, because you guys complain about that a lot. Do you want something else to do? Check out this podcast. It's true crime. It's called Unsolved Murders, True Crime Stories, and it's a great twist on true crime and cold cases. Unlike us, they have a staff of screenwriters and an ensemble of voice actors and a talented digital production team to work on every single episode, so you know it's going to be great. It contains dramatized scenes that bring cold cases to life alongside the host's analysis of each case, which sounds pretty cool, and we should probably think about doing that. At the end of each case, the hosts tell you who they believe committed the crime, similar to us, which I know is something that you guys all really, really like. They've covered cases like the Black Dahlia, Joan Robinson Hill murder, and even the Zodiac. So go ahead and check them out. They come out every Tuesday, so, nice balance to the week. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, or pretty much anywhere else. You can check them out on Parcast as well. That's Parcast, Parcast.com/unsolved. That's Parcast with an R, Parcast.com/unsolved. Because waiting is kind of like getting punched in the eye.
And we're back. All right, our first theory, of course, a lot of people thought this guy must be, or might be at least, Jack the Ripper.
Of course.
Along about the time the second body showed up, Jack the Ripper had just begun his big killing spree, because his first killing that we know of for sure was August 31st, 1888.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, what do they call those? The
Canonical Five?
The Canonical Five took place in a very short period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was obviously speculation about Jack being the killer. Police said there was no connection. I'm assuming because the details of the killing were so much different.
Can you, sorry for those of us who aren't crazy, can you just quickly summarize what those differences were in MOs?
No dismemberment.
Yeah.
They were killed in semi-public spaces, like in an alley just off of a street where there is traffic.
Mm-hmm.
The bodies were dumped because Jack apparently, I think he got interrupted on one, maybe two, but there were ones where the body was just found and it was cut up and like an organ or two had been removed, like the uterus again, for some reason. But the bodies were not drug away or hacked up. Mm-hmm. Like the MOs were very different in that regard. Jack appeared to just leave them where they lie.
Pretty much.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and one of the other things that was remarkably different too is just the spacing between the killings, because the Canonical Five, the absolute for sure confirmed Jack the Ripper murders, took place between August 31st and November 9th, 1888, which is 71 days for an average of about 2 weeks between murders, whereas the torso killings averaged about 7 months in between murders. And so
of torsos showing up.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. And this is, I think, possibly the reason that Jack got wound up being so much more famous than the Thames Torso Killer, which is a killing every 2 weeks. It really keeps your story in the headlines for a long time.
It's easy for people to forget that there was a body or a series of body parts found on the bank of the river.
Yeah, a year goes by,
month.
2 years, a year and a half goes by.
Yeah, let alone 6 or 9.
It's also scarier when you're just like, when it's such a public MO.
Uh-huh.
When you're like, I'm just walking down the street and literally any of these people could just slash out at me and try to kill me or actually do kill me.
Yeah.
That's way scarier than like, I don't know, there's no heads on those bodies. They don't. There's not even, a personage that you can attach to that body. It's just a unfortunate
That's somebody
body.
you can really relate to.
Well, yeah, it's like not even human 100% at that point.
I guess so, yeah. Because I have a head. She
Yeah.
does not have a head.
She does not have a head.
Yeah, we're different in that respect.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm alive. She's not. We're different.
Yeah.
But I guess that's also not to say that I would completely discount the Jack the Ripper theory in that, it's certainly possible to me that those were just the ones that Jack got caught or interrupted on, or even that was his, part of his escalation. I don't know.
You're trying to step up the pace and it was too fast, too much? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, the hard part is that with the Jack the Ripper case, it's believed that he had encounters with these women before because they were known prostitutes, and yet with these women, the torso murders, there's nobody knows who they are, so we can't draw that connection. So therefore, to me, it opens the floodgates for people, and I don't know. I don't think it's Jack for that reason, just because of the rate. As Joe said.
I would agree. I don't think it is, but I don't think that it's a totally wildly implausible theory. I think it's one worth entertaining.
It's
certainly.
definitely a question worth asking. I think that my feeling about Jack is that Jack was a man on a mission. He really was killing a lot of people left and right. I don't know why. Whereas our torso killer was
a little more methodical.
A little more methodical, yeah. And he played games with the public and with the police. I mean, putting all the parts around for everybody to find on public display like that. He was playing games, kind of like leaving pieces of a jigsaw puzzle scattered around the town for people to find.
True enough.
Yeah, Jack didn't really do that.
True.
So a lot of differences, but.
Although Jack did mail supposedly mailed like a liver or something to somebody. Do you remember that was one of the last victims?
Yeah.
But again, still, that's kind of an outlier in his case.
Yeah.
I don't think it links it to this one.
Yeah, and that was not one of the canonical 5, too, right? And it could have been one of the.
It has been. I don't want to say that with any certainty, Joe, because it's been so long since I've read about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, same
and you
here.
know the Ripper fans out there that are listening to this will just
rip us.
We'll just torch us over it if we get it wrong.
They
so
will
I'm erring on the
you.
side of caution.
They will have your liver for dinner.
Please don't cut me up.
Okay, so probably not Jack the Ripper.
Okay, yeah. So let's say not Jack. Could have been another serial killer, and frankly, it obviously was another serial killer. And who knows? Maybe this guy was Jack's inspiration. Maybe Jack was reading the papers about this guy and body parts and everything. I thought, maybe I'll give that a try. And he liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a big town like London, you'd think there'd be at least 1 or 2 serial killers at work at any given time, even back in those days, right? Police...
Especially back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
There was no TV or anything.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What else was there to do?
And, people were a little less squeamish back in those days, too, I mean, you went out and got your dinner at the butcher's, probably watched him kill something right in front of you and gut it.
Yeah.
Cut out a steak for you.
That actually makes me wonder about again, we're going back to this, but the whole conversation about the level of expertise that the bodies were dissected with.
Mm-hmm.
If you go down and you buy a leg of lamb or a hindquarters of an animal, and then you have to you butcher it on your own at home, or you're just used to doing that kind of stuff to prep your meals, again, there becomes a certain level of familiarity.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people, not just butchers. I mean, people hunters, for example, they become rather good at skinning and dressing out, animals that they've
Cooks.
killed,
I mean, if you're a cook in some house, you're probably cutting up the meat to a degree. I mean, there's all kinds of occupations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Podcast hosts.
Oh, good point.
Have I shown you my knife?
Yeah, okay.
It's my stabbing knife.
Yeah.
I'm a piano wire guy myself.
Yeah,
you don't need to worry about me, Devin.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably another serial killer, right?
But who was the killer? Again, police never came anywhere near naming a suspect, and I'm thinking that might be another reason we got this Jack the Ripper mystery here, which is why is Jack so much more famous. The police never came anywhere close to naming anybody as a suspect. Nobody at all. And in the case of Jack, of course, there were some suspects that were out there fairly quickly, and of course that gave people a lot of license to sit around the pub speculating. Well, did John Doe over here, was he really the killer? And in this case, there was just nothing much to sink your teeth into because, hey, who knows? There's no suspects. And so, even though obviously it was another serial killer, we'll never know who the hell it was. But here's a few possible theories as to why this person would do it.
Yeah.
It could have been maybe a John, basically a guy who frequents prostitutes, and who decided that maybe this particular girl is got the goods on me or whatever.
Or he picked something up from his encounters with her.
Oh, maybe that's it too. He was feeling a little vengeful about the whole thing,
but didn't know which one it was.
It could have been that. Or maybe somebody threatened him with a little blackmail. Maybe it was actually somebody fairly well-to-do, and he decided to, just kill her rather than,
Let the
Play
scandal
mind.
get out.
Yeah. And then, perhaps there was one person he killed who was trying to blackmail him, and the other ones were kind of loose ends.